My name is Sarah. I'm 33 years old, and I've been married to my husband Andrew for 7 years. We live in a quiet town in Oregon, a place with rolling green hills and cool air all year round. The day we moved here, I believed I had finally found peace after years of struggling with city life. I wasn't expecting a perfect life, just a real home. And for a long time, I thought I had that. Andrew is a quiet but thoughtful man. He's not the overly romantic type, but he listens, helps me with the dishes after dinner, and always remembers to buy the exact tea I like whenever he goes grocery shopping. Those little things made me believe I was in a good marriage. Not thrilling, but solid. But not everything was as smooth as it looked on the outside. The one issue and the biggest thorn in my marriage was Grace, Andrew's older sister. She's 37, lives alone in Seattle, and every time she shows up, chaos follows. Grace has a way of making everything revolve around her. Whether it's a cozy dinner or a weekend picnic, she always finds a way to make herself the center of attention. At first, I thought maybe it was because she wasn't married yet and felt lonely sometimes. I tried to be understanding. I invited her over, cooked her favorite dishes, and many times let her take over the conversation during gatherings just to keep her happy. But patience has its limits. I remember my wedding day so clearly, a day that was supposed to be just about me and Andrew. While everyone was raising their glasses for a toast, Grace suddenly held up her hand and shouted, "I'm engaged!" All eyes turned to her, cameras flashing everywhere, and there I stood, my wedding dress barely fanned out, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't even tasted, trying to keep a smile on my face. Andrew just shrugged and whispered, "You know how she is. She likes to joke around." A joke? If that was a joke, I'd like to know when it ends. A year later, when I got promoted to project supervisor, Andrew threw a small dinner party at home to celebrate. Everyone was having a good time until Grace interrupted with, "I've been seriously thinking about writing a book." Nobody asked, nobody brought it up. She went on and on the whole evening. No one remembered the celebratory cake or why we were even gathered there. I used to tell Andrew about how upset I felt, but every time he would just laugh and say, "Sweetheart, that's just Grace. She doesn't mean anything by it." Right. Grace didn't mean to. Grace just accidentally turned my wedding into an engagement announcement. Grace slipped up and stole the spotlight at my promotion dinner. And Grace coincidentally called right when we were leaving for a holiday trip, just to say she broke up with boyfriend number 14 and needed to talk to Andrew. I started feeling like a guest in my own life. Every time I got close to a meaningful moment, Grace would blow in like a whirlwind and take over all the attention. And Andrew? He kept quietly defending her, like it was second nature. I'm not sure when I started getting suspicious. Maybe it was one evening when I was sitting alone in the living room, listening to Andrew talking to Grace on the phone in the next room. His voice was softer, gentler than when he spoke to me. I sat there, clutching a cold cup of tea, and felt a chill settle in my chest like winter arriving early. I didn't say anything that night, or for a long time after that. But I knew something wasn't right. Things started to go downhill after that evening with the cold tea. I began noticing more, not because I was paranoid, but because Grace kept pushing my limits in ways I'd never imagined. Last Thanksgiving, we hosted at Andrew's place, the first time since we renovated the kitchen. I spent a whole week planning, prepping ingredients, and even learned how to make traditional stuffing from my former mother-in-law over a video call. Everything was perfect. Until Grace walked in, nearly an hour late, in a sparkling red dress, face beaming like she was about to host a live TV show. "Sarah," she beamed, "sorry I'm late. I have exciting news to share." Before I could say a word, she turned to the crowd gathered around the table and shouted, "I made it to the final casting round for a reality show. I might be on TV." The room burst into wows and, "That's amazing," followed by a flood of questions. No one remembered I had just pulled the turkey out of the oven, or that I was about to invite everyone to the table. The dining setup I spent the whole morning arranging became the backdrop to Grace's big announcement. I looked at Andrew, hoping at least this time he would say something, but he just smiled, nodded at his sister, and said, "That's amazing. You did it." I bit my lip. Once again, I was pushed to the sidelines in my own home. Then came my birthday in January. I'm not one for grand celebrations, so I planned a cozy evening with a few close friends. Andrew suggested inviting his family, and I agreed. Didn't want to make it a big deal. I baked the cake, picked the wine, prepared everything thoughtfully. Once everyone was seated and Andrew had just played the happy birthday song, Grace suddenly stood up and raised her glass. "I have something special to share," she said with a bright smile. "I'm thinking about moving to Portugal. Time to change the air and live life to the fullest, right?" The cheerful atmosphere was swallowed up by loud applause and a flurry of questions about her relocation plans. One of my friends even joked, "Oh, wow, Grace is such an inspiration." I stood there, forcing a smile, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. After the party, I asked Andrew, "Don't you think it's strange how every time I have something meaningful going on, Grace always finds a way to interrupt?" He just shook his head and said, "Probably just a coincidence. You know how she is, always impulsive. She doesn't mean anything by it." "You really believe it's not intentional?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He hesitated for a moment. "Grace isn't a bad person. She just likes attention. Don't let it get to you." That was the problem. I didn't want to let it get to me. I had tried so hard to let things slide, to excuse Grace the way Andrew always did. But over time, her antics became more calculated, harder to tell apart from pure accident or deliberate intent. Then came the most important event of the year, my debut interior design collection at a local exhibition. It was a dream I'd pursued since college, and I had worked tirelessly for 11 months to bring it to life. Andrew came with me, along with a few close friends. I even invited his mother. She had always supported me. Grace declined, saying she had a team meeting. I was relieved. Honestly, I felt lighter not having to worry about her ruining the launch. But right in the middle of the event, while I was being interviewed by a local magazine reporter, Grace walked in. This time with a man who looked very much like a director, carrying a mini camcorder and scanning the room like he was hunting for the best camera angle. I tried to stay calm and continued answering questions, but as soon as the interview ended, Grace pulled me aside and whispered, "You know, this guy is the director of a documentary series about creative women in the Northwest. I thought, if you had time, maybe he'd be interested in you too." I froze. She had shown up, disrupted everything I worked for, and acted like she was helping. As if she were offering me an opportunity. As if this event, 11 months of my effort, was merely a backdrop for her to perform a new role. That night, as Andrew and I sat in the car heading home, I said nothing. But in my mind, everything started falling into place, like puzzle pieces finally finding their fit. Grace wasn't just selfish. And Andrew wasn't just an easygoing older brother. There was something deeper, stranger, and I needed to know the truth. I will never forget that evening, my 33rd birthday. After months of working nonstop on a project, on top of Grace repeatedly ruining important moments in my life, I didn't have high expectations for my birthday. Honestly, all I wanted was a peaceful night, a few close friends, some soft jazz, and a chocolate cake I made myself. But Andrew insisted on hosting a small party at home. He promised he'd take care of everything: guests, decorations, food. "All you have to do is sit back and enjoy," he said, with a look that made me nod even though I still had doubts. I tried to believe him one more time. I wanted to believe that, despite everything before, my birthday, for once, would be about me. That evening, the house felt warm and lovely. Soft yellow lighting, gentle piano music filling the living room. My friends showed up, bringing small gifts and heartfelt wishes. I wore my favorite navy blue dress, hair in a loose bun, feeling at ease in my own skin after a long stretch of stress. Grace arrived late, as always. She walked in wearing a floor-length white dress and a suspiciously bright smile. I'd learned not to expect her to respect my space, but that night, I was determined not to let her ruin my mood. Everything seemed peaceful, until the moment I picked up the knife to cut the cake in the center of the table. Andrew had just raised his phone to take a picture when Grace spoke up. Louder than the music. "Wait, before you cut the cake, I have something super important to share." I looked at her, the knife still hovering midair. A bitter feeling rose in my chest, like I already knew what was coming, but couldn't stop it. "I'm pregnant," Grace shouted, placing her hands on her belly, lips curling into a proud, overly theatrical smile. The room went silent for a second, then erupted with, "Oh my gosh! Congratulations! That's amazing!" I stood there, frozen, still holding the cake knife. The cake, a symbol of my tiny hopes, shattered in spirit before anyone had a slice. I glanced at Andrew. He just shrugged, smiling awkwardly. "You know how she is. She loves surprises." I swallowed hard, forcing a crooked smile, and set the knife down. But inside me, something broke for good. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even disappointment. It was understanding. A part of my mind had finally woken up after a long sleep. 3 weeks earlier, I had accidentally discovered something that made my blood run cold. That day, Andrew was in the shower and I was looking for an old invoice on his laptop to print for our tax report. I never planned to check anything else, until an email popped up in the corner of the screen. Transfer of $2,100, confirmed, sent from Andrew's bank with the recipient's name, Grace. I clicked. Then came a stream of other emails, transactions, messages, call logs, the texts that left me stunned. Grace. Has she started suspecting anything? Andrew, not yet. I deleted everything. You have to be careful. Grace, if it all comes out, just say the baby isn't yours. Andrew's walk handedly in. Sarah won't let it go, but I'll handle it. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the screen, hands icy cold, mind spinning. I just remember the feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Grace wasn't just someone who liked stealing the spotlight. She was having a child with my own husband. I didn't cry right then. The pain was too deep for tears. I just remember standing up, grabbing my coat, and walking out into the cold, rainy night. I walked aimlessly for over an hour, until my mind became clearer than it had ever been. I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't beg, and I definitely wouldn't stay silent. If Grace wanted to steal every moment from me, then I would give her a memory she would never forget. Since that freezing night, I've lived with a quiet fire in my chest. Enough not to burn me alive, but impossible to put out. I no longer sought explanations or apologies from Andrew. I didn't care about the reasons behind Grace's fake hugs. From the second I saw the message, "If it all comes out, just say the baby isn't yours," I knew I was no longer a trusting wife. I was the betrayed woman, and soon to be the one who would end it all. I hired a private investigator just 2 days later. His name was Mike. Early 40s, quiet, eyes sharp as steel, never missing a detail. I gave him everything: Grace's name, her number, Andrew's work schedule, and one request. I want proof. Clear. Undeniable. Mike worked frighteningly fast. Within a week, he sent me a file of photos. Andrew and Grace leaving a roadside motel in Salem, hand in hand, both wearing masks, but not enough to hide the intimacy. Pictures of them dining together, gazing into each other's eyes. Restaurant receipts, hotel bills, and most damning of all, a printout of another bank statement. Andrew had transferred over $25,000 to Grace in 8 months. I printed everything out and arranged it neatly in a black leather folder. It looked like a project report, but inside was the collapse of a family and the birth of the truth. Ugh! I didn't say a word to Andrew. I kept smiling, kept cooking dinner, kept calling to order the birthday cake like nothing had happened. I even bought a new dress, wine-colored, fitting my figure after weeks of sleepless weight loss. I wanted to end my birthday in a special way, not with wishes, but with a blow no one could recover from. That night, I stood in the living room, cake knife in hand, everyone laughing and chatting around me. Grace had announced her pregnancy 20 minutes earlier. She even pretended to blush, her hands gently resting on her belly, playing the expectant mother role so convincingly it was almost laughable. Andrew wore a forced smile the whole time, as if everything was under control. I didn't cut the cake. Instead, I lifted my glass and tapped it lightly, just like Grace always did to steal the spotlight. "Everyone," I said, my voice soft but clear, "I have something I'd like to share too, and I think now is the perfect time." Grace smiled that fake smile, and Andrew looked at me like he had no idea what I was about to do. I stepped toward the table, set down my glass, opened my purse, and took out the black leather folder. "I want to congratulate Grace," I said, "because she's going to be a mother." "That's wonderful. But it would be even more wonderful if everyone knew who the father is." The room went silent, like someone had flipped a switch. I saw Grace's eyes dart nervously, and Andrew's brow began to furrow. I know this might sound shocking, but I'm a fan of transparency. I opened the folder and pulled out the first photo. Grace and Andrew walking into a hotel. A friend standing near me blurted out, "What is this?" I showed the next one of them having dinner, hands touching beneath the table. Then the money transfers, the messages. I didn't say another word, just laid out each piece of evidence like a knife slicing through deception. Grace stepped back, her face pale. This is fake. You made all of this up." "Oh, if I made it up, then I guess the bank did too, and the hotel's security cameras." I placed the folder on the center table. "Anyone can see it for themselves, if they want." Andrew stood frozen. No excuses. No whispering, "She's just joking." Only the raw truth on the table, and a heavy silence that felt endless. One of my friends, Lena, opened the folder, glanced through a few photos, then looked at me, eyes wide. "Oh my God," Grace gasped, turning to Andrew. "Say something. I thought you—" "Shut up." Andrew cut her off, voice hoarse. "She knows everything." She froze, her face white as paper. No one laughed anymore. No more congratulations. Everyone stood there, part stunned, part fascinated, as if watching the final scene of a drama, where the lead's mask finally falls off. Then, Grace suddenly turned and bolted for the door. Andrew stood still for a second, then ran after her, shouting, "Grace, wait!" I watched them go without a flicker of emotion. I turned back, picked up the cake knife, and said calmly, "Well then, shall we cut the cake?" A faint laugh rose somewhere in the room, like a wisp of smoke after a storm. I caught myself a thick slice of cake. And I knew this was only the beginning. I thought the moment Andrew ran out the door after Grace would be the end of everything. I was wrong. Just 10 minutes after they disappeared from my doorstep, a car horn blared outside. Short and urgent. I stepped onto the porch and saw Mr. Charles, Andrew's father, pulling up in his SUV. He stepped out, face flushed, jaw clenched so tight I thought it might explode. "Sarah," he said, voice shaking with anger. "Where are they?" I pointed toward the small alley leading to the main road. "They just ran off. Just left." Charles didn't say another word. He stormed down the sidewalk like a tornado. I followed, confused, barely catching him mutter under his breath, "I can't believe it. My own son." By the time I reached the street, I saw Andrew and Grace standing by his car, arguing furiously. Under the streetlight, Grace no longer looked sweet or gentle like when she'd announced her pregnancy. She was pointing a finger in Andrew's face, eyes blazing with fury. "You promised she would never find out," Grace hissed. "I can't control everything, Grace," Andrew shouted back. And just then Charles arrived. He didn't speak, didn't ask, didn't scold. He just raised his fist and punched Andrew square in the face with a force I didn't think a man over 60 could have. Andrew fell back onto the sidewalk, yelling, blood trickling from his nose. Grace screamed and rushed to help him, while Charles stood still, chest heaving, his face full of disgust. Neighbors began peeking out their doors. Someone must have called the police because less than 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up, red and blue lights flashing across the street. An officer stepped out, asking quickly, "What's going on here?" Andrew, still on the ground, breathing heavily, his shirt stained with blood, groaned, "He hit me." The officer looked at Charles. "Sir, did you do that?" Charles nodded without flinching. "I did, and I don't regret it." The officer sighed, stepping closer. "We'll have to take you in unless the victim decides not to press charges." I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm this man's wife." I pointed at Andrew, then looked at the officer. "And I've been betrayed by both my husband and his sister. What Mr. Charles did was a split-second reaction to the horrific truth that just came to light." Grace yelled, "No one has the right to hit someone over personal matters." But Andrew, at that moment, shook his head. I don't want to press charges. I just want to leave." The officer nodded and motioned for Charles to step back. "You're lucky. Next time, it won't be so easy." Grace helped Andrew to his feet, but he pushed her hand away. "Don't touch me." I noticed that. A small, strange detail, as if suddenly he didn't want to be near her anymore. The two of them got into the car quickly. No words from me, no glance at Charles. Headlights flicked on and the car disappeared into the night, like 2 shadows with nowhere left to hide. I stood there, hands cold despite the light spring breeze. Charles turned to me, placing a firm yet gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart," he said, "if you need anything, call me." I nodded, lips trembling, knowing I wasn't alone anymore. The next day, I thought maybe I'd find a little peace. I was wrong. An anonymous email appeared in my work inbox at 6:43 a.m. No subject line, no specific address, just one sentence. "So you think you've won?" I sat there, staring at the screen. I didn't need to think hard to guess who sent it. Grace. She wasn't the type to let go easily. I opened the attachment. Inside were clumsily photoshopped images, made to look like I was having private meetings with a male coworker, along with fake text messages spliced together from who knows where. A chill ran down my spine. Grace had started a new game. And I knew one thing for sure: if she wanted a fight, I wouldn't back down. That morning, I got to the office early like I always did, latte in hand and my quarterly report folder under my arm. I never imagined that within 30 minutes, my world would flip in a way that not even my husband's betrayal could compare. As soon as I turned on my computer, the email icon kept blinking. In my inbox was an internal message from HR, bold subject line, "Urgent, immediate in-person meeting, strictly confidential." I was still confused when Mr. Gordon, the head of HR, knocked on my office door and said curtly, "Sarah, come with me. Now." The small conference room at the end of the hall had never felt so cold. Mr. Gordon, a legal representative and a management board member, quietly informed me that the company had received multiple anonymous emails accusing me of harassment, misusing project funds, and creating a hostile work environment. I sat there, frozen. "None of this is true," I said, trying to stay composed. "Who would—" The emails came from 3 different addresses. Mr. Gordon said carefully, with screenshots of internal messages, financial reports, and an anonymous statement from someone claiming to be a former colleague. I nearly dropped my latte. "I've never done anything wrong. These accusations are fabricated," I said, my emotions rising. "We're not drawing any conclusions yet, Sarah," the legal rep added, "but pending investigation, you'll be temporarily suspended. Everything should be cleared up within a few weeks." When I left the meeting room, my mind was spinning like someone had dumped ice water over my head in the middle of winter. I packed up in silence, coworkers, curious eyes stabbing into my back like needles. As I stepped out of the building, a sharp wind brushed my face, and I knew Grace— no, the woman with the angelic face and an icy soul— had made her move. This time, no subtlety, no backstabbing. She wanted to destroy my career. That night, I went through old files, checked every conversation, every expense report I'd ever sent. Everything was clean. But I knew Grace didn't need the truth to write a story. All she needed was doubt. I called Lena, my best friend and colleague who had stood by my side for over 5 years. Her jaw dropped as I told her everything. Grace? She's pulling that again? Sarah, you know. I once heard something from one of her old coworkers in Seattle, and back then I thought it was just a rumor. I froze. What was it? Lena lowered her voice. I heard that a few years ago, Grace got a close friend fired by accusing her of harassing their boss. Everything was anonymous. No one ever confirmed who sent it, but the woman who was accused had her life fall apart for years afterward. I was stunned. Grace wasn't just selfish or jealous. She had a pattern, a track record, destroying people through rumors, through anonymous accusations that left no trace. Lena looked at me intently. I have a friend who used to work with Grace at that company in Seattle. Let me reach out, see if she knows anything else. I nodded, feeling like I was tracking a predator in angel's clothing. 2 days later, Lena texted me just one sentence. You need to meet this woman. She's ready to talk. I arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe near the train station. Her name was Dana. Mid-30s, tired eyes, sunken cheeks, like someone who'd spent too many nights without sleep. When Lena told me about you, I knew immediately who was behind it, Dana said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. Grace didn't just ruin my life. She almost cost me custody of my child. I held my breath. Dana explained that after she broke up with her boyfriend, a former coworker of Grace's, she received anonymous letters accusing her of inappropriate behavior at work, along with doctored private photos. Though there was no hard evidence, the management still fired her to protect the company's reputation. Grace was behind it all, Dana said. Back then I was too scared to speak up, but now I can't let her keep hurting people. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, my mind already starting to form a plan. If Grace thought I would back down, she had picked the wrong person. I used to believe in kindness. Now I believe in justice and the truth. And I was about to use both to bring her into the light. When I stepped out of the cafe with Dana, my head was spinning with all the information. Her story didn't just confirm that Grace had used the same tactics to destroy someone else. It made it clear. What I'd experienced was just a small piece of the wreckage Grace had left behind. I knew I needed more than stories. I needed proof, and no one was better at that than Mike, the private investigator I had hired before. I called him right from the car, still parked by the curb, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Mike, I said, my voice low but firm. I need you to find everything you can on Grace. Her past, finances, legal issues, old relationships, everything. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then he replied, voice raspy as always. You really want to know it all, Sarah? Even the things that might make you stop seeing her as a regular person? I passed the point of calling her a person, I said, eyes locked on the steering wheel. Mike gave a quiet chuckle. All right, give me 3 days. I hung up and took a deep breath. Then I called Charles. He'd picked up after just 2 rings. Sarah? I need your help, I said directly. I think it's time we joined forces. About Grace? His voice dropped. About everything. Andrew, my career, and the people Grace has already hurt. Charles was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said something I'll never forget. Tell me what you need. I'll do it all. 3 days later, Mike sent me a hard drive and a thick folder. I didn't open them right away. Instead, I arranged to meet Charles at an old bar on the outskirts of town, a place so quiet you could hear the ice clinking in glasses and the wind whistling outside the windows. When he arrived, I was already there, the hard drive and documents neatly placed on the table. I hope I'm overreacting, I said quietly. But you need to see this. Together, we looked through every video clip, every photo, every email Mike had uncovered. There was traffic cam footage showing Grace near the scene of a so-called stalking incident she'd reported, photos of her leaving the law office she once accused of harassment, holding a thick envelope, copies of legal documents. Grace had once been sued for defamation but quietly settled out of court. Charles stared at the screen, his face paling. She's been doing this for how long? Since before I even met Andrew, I said, eyes still scanning the documents. And not just once, not just one victim. I handed him a printed statement from Dana, along with photo ID confirmation and case details. Charles flipped through the pages as if they weighed a ton. I always thought I raised my daughter right, he murmured, voice cracking. I didn't know how to comfort him, because honestly, I still couldn't understand how someone like Grace had manipulated so many people for so long, without anyone brave enough to stop her. We need a way to bring this truth into the open, I said after a long silence. Not for revenge. To protect others. Charles nodded. And where do we start? I looked him straight in the eye. A confrontation, with witnesses and the truth laid out on the table. I told him the plan forming in my head. A family gathering, under the pretense of resolving misunderstandings, inviting both Andrew and Grace, and letting everything unfold in the light, with nowhere left to hide. Charles was quiet, then let out a dry chuckle. You're sharp. But are you sure Grace will come? I'll make sure she can't refuse. I pulled out my phone and sent Grace a short message. We need to talk. Just us. No Sarah. Less than a minute later, she replied. Where? When? I smiled. Luring the fish had never been the hard part. The hard part was when the fish didn't realize. The hook was barbed this time. And I wasn't trembling anymore. That Saturday afternoon, the Oregon sky was gray, heavy with clouds but no rain. The air was strangely still and thick. I stepped into Andrew's family's old house, the same place where we had our first Christmas together, and my chest felt heavy. Every corner was familiar, but today, everything had changed. This time, I wasn't arriving as a daughter-in-law. I was here to expose the truth. Charles, who had stood by me throughout the past days, stood in the center of the living room, having arranged everything meticulously as if it were just another family gathering. Linda, Andrew's mother, sat quietly on a chair, her face pale. Rachel, my best friend, and Dana, who had once been Grace's victim, were both there too, each holding documents, their expressions resolute. Everyone had been briefed. Stay silent, observe, and let me lead. Around 6 o'clock, Grace and Andrew arrived, walking in like they still had everything under control. Grace wore a pale pink dress, her smile far too bright. Andrew looked tired and tense, his eyes avoiding mine. Good, everyone's here, Charles said in his steady voice. Let's sit down and talk like a family. Grace glanced at me with a smug half-smile. Oh, finally someone acting like an adult. I didn't respond. I simply pulled out a chair, opened the folder in front of me, and looked her straight in the eyes. Grace, I began, my voice strangely calm. Today, we're not here to talk about personal feelings, blame, or excuses. We're only going to talk about the truth. Grace let out a small laugh. Sarah, what kind of drama are you trying to stage now? I opened the folder. I'll ask, and if you don't answer, I'll present the evidence. I placed the first photo on the table, a picture of Grace leaving the law office she once accused of harassment, holding a thick envelope in her hand. 8 months ago, you accused a lawyer of misconduct. Do you remember that case? Grace froze. That has nothing to do with this. I'm not asking if it's related, I'm asking if you remember it. She didn't reply. I continued. I have a letter from the building manager confirming you visited multiple times, always leaving with the same envelope. And here's a copy of his account statement showing regular refunds in the 2 weeks that followed. Linda gasped. Charles clenched the arms of his chair. Andrew kept his head down, shoulders tense. I placed the next item, a traffic cam video showing Grace, coincidentally, being followed after a breakup, then accusing her ex of stalking. I also have his statement. And police evidence that you yourself sent the anonymous letters claiming to be the stalker. You're making this up, Grace cried out, her face pale. I'm not making it up. Mike did. And Mike's a private investigator, not a fiction writer. I slid the next folder toward her. Dana's testimony, complete with a notarized confirmation. And this is Dana, the woman you tried to destroy with doctored photos. She lost her job, nearly lost custody of her child, but she's brave enough to sit here today. Grace turned, glaring at Dana, but Dana didn't flinch. She sat tall, eyes calm. For the first time, I saw Grace falter. Her hands trembled slightly, lips pressed tight, and her eyes darted like she was looking for an escape. Then, unexpectedly, Andrew spoke. Grace. Is it true? Grace turned to him. I told you Sarah's making all of this up to ruin us. No, Andrew cut her off, for the first time looking directly into her eyes. Is it true? The things she said? Did you do all of that? Grace stood up, snapping. You don't trust me? After everything? Andrew was silent. Then he said slowly but clearly, I trusted you. For far too long. No one said a word. Grace looked around, stunned, as if searching for someone to take her side, but everyone had turned their backs. No one believed her anymore. And she knew it. You don't understand anything, Grace screamed, slamming her hand on the table. I only did what I had to do to survive. No, I said, standing, eyes locked on her. You did all of this for one reason. You can't stand to see other people happy. Grace stepped back, then turned, heading for the door. Andrew stood now too. I'm not going with you. She spun around like she'd been slapped. Andrew. I lost my wife because of you, he said, voice cracking. I lost my family, my career, people's trust. And now, I realize you never loved me. You just wanted to win. Grace said nothing. She just looked at him, her eyes empty, then turned and walked out without a word. The room was silent. I closed my eyes for a second. And when I opened them, I knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different life. One that no longer included Grace. 3 weeks after that final confrontation, I received an email from HR. The subject line was just 4 words. Internal investigation completed. I sat still for a few seconds, feeling like my heart had dropped into my stomach. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked. The message was brief but carried weight. We have determined the allegations to be unfounded. All submitted materials were sent from unverified anonymous addresses. Additionally, cross-checking with internal data revealed no misconduct on the part of Ms. Sarah Bennett. We sincerely apologize for the disruption and welcome you back to work starting next week. HR has also recommended you for promotion consideration in the next quarter. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The chaos had passed, leaving behind a solid ground where I could begin again, steady, untouched by manipulation. News about Grace, or what remained of her reputation, spread like wildfire. After that meeting, Dana officially filed a lawsuit with full evidence. Soon after, 2 other women from Seattle came forward, victims of Grace's past schemes. Social media posts began circulating with headlines like, Two-faced woman, the real face behind a master manipulator of families and careers. Fake entrepreneur and a trail of victims across states. Grace disappeared from social media. Her phone number stopped working. Word was she left Oregon and went into hiding in a small town in Southern California, far from anywhere that knew her name. And Andrew? He lost his job just days after the meeting, partly due to the personal scandal, partly because questionable money transfers to Grace surfaced during an internal audit. The company didn't announce a reason, just one sentence in the staff memo. We are terminating the employment contract under confidentiality terms. Charles, Andrew's father, no longer speaks to him. Linda cut ties as well. Even his closest friends quietly distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a man who betrayed his wife for an affair with his own sister. I heard he's staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Gresham, living off credit cards day by day. He sent a few old messages afterward. Long apologies, promises to change, even begging to come back. But I never replied. Not out of anger, but because I had moved past the point of needing to forgive. I returned to work with a new attitude. No more shrinking back, no more playing nice to keep the peace. I spoke up, stood my ground, and amazingly, people listened. The following month, I was officially promoted to project director. At a small celebration, my boss raised a glass and said, "Sarah, you're not just efficient. You're unbreakable." I smiled, not out of pride, but because I had finally found myself again. That June, I booked a solo trip to Florence, Italy. Not to run away, but to reclaim what grace could never steal from me: freedom, identity, and peace. I spent mornings watching the Arno River, afternoons wandering cobbled alleys, evenings sipping red wine on the hotel rooftop, watching golden lights sweep over the old rooftops. I journaled every day, sometimes just one sentence. Today I felt light. I didn't try to forget what happened. I just learned how to look back without letting it hurt anymore. Grace took many things, but not my will. Andrew betrayed me, but never stole my faith in myself. And the people who once doubted me, now they look at me with respect. I don't need their apologies. I just need them to know. Sarah Bennett stood up, moved on, and she's never looking back. One chapter has closed, and I, with a healed heart, am writing a new one. Free, radiant, and entirely mine. Life taught me a harsh lesson. Sometimes the ones you trust most are the ones who push you over the edge. But I didn't let the pain define me. I learned to rise, to reclaim my voice, and to live by my values. The losses that once broke me became the fuel that made me stronger. I didn't choose revenge. I chose truth. I chose light. And from there, I kept moving forward, no longer afraid, no longer bound, completely free. What do you think of Sarah's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional true stories and powerful life lessons about family. My name is Ava Thompson, and I'm 28 years old. For nearly 3 decades, I've grown used to feeling invisible in my own family. To my parents, Susan and Mark, I was always the responsible one, the one who could take care of herself, and therefore didn't need to be coddled. They run a small bakery in the suburbs of Pittsburgh called Thompson's Oven. Everyone in town knows the place. The warm loaves of bread, the soft cream-filled cookies, but no one knew me. The one behind the counter through all those childhood years, cleaning up while other kids played, doing homework behind the oven, in the scent of butter and sugar. Brandon, my younger brother, 2 years my junior, was different. He was the golden child. He didn't have to be brilliant or hardworking. One smile from him could melt the room. When Brandon forgot his homework, it was because he was under stress. When I earned a scholarship, it was just because she's always been studious. He was loved unconditionally. I had to work for every scrap of recognition. I didn't complain. I put myself through school on a scholarship, graduated, rented a modest apartment in the city, worked in marketing at a furniture company, and built my life, piece by piece. I wasn't flashy, but I was disciplined. No debt, no reckless spending. I always believed, if no one hands you a door, build your own. The only person who ever made me feel unconditionally loved was my grandfather, Walter. He was the only one who truly listened to me, who remembered my birthday without a calendar, and who once told me I had vision. When he passed away 3 years ago, I felt like my heart shattered into 100 pieces. But what shocked me even more came during the reading of his will. He had left me a trust fund. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to help me buy my first apartment or open a small coffee shop. something I had dreamed of for years. There were conditions, though. I could only access the trust once I turned 31, and even then, only for specific purposes like housing, education, or starting a legitimate business. That seemed fair to me. I've never been the impulsive type, so I let the trust sit untouched, like a quiet promise between me and him. At the time, I thought everything would stay peaceful. But then, Brandon got engaged. Everything shifted the moment he showed up with a sparkling ring on his finger, and a woman so seemingly perfect it was like the whole family fell under a spell. Delilah Carter, 27 years old, walked into our house with a brown sugar smile, soft waves cascading over her shoulders and a voice like warm honey. She didn't have to try to be adored. Just one charming greeting, one tilt of her head, and my mother was already laughing, my father noticeably at ease. During the welcome dinner, as everyone raised their glasses to toast the happy news, Delilah sat directly across from me. Her eyes sparkled, mischievous, like she'd already rehearsed what came next. When the laughter quieted down, she suddenly turned toward me and spoke in a voice light as a feather on water. "Ava, I heard your grandfather left you a trust fund. Have you thought about helping Brandon? I mean, a wedding is such a big milestone, right?" I paused for a second. No one had ever brought that up at family dinners, at least not in front of me. I set my wine glass down, doing my best to keep a polite smile. Yeah, he did leave a fund. But I can't access it until I reach the age requirement, and I already have plans for it. Delilah tilted her head. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes, at that moment I realized, weren't those of a guest making friendly conversation. They were the eyes of someone calculating their next move. Like she had just knocked on the first door in a carefully planned campaign she fully expected to win. "Oh, of course," she replied smoothly. "I just thought, if someone in the family could help, Brandon's wedding could be truly perfect. Starting a new life isn't easy, you know." I smiled faintly and nodded, but deep down, I was uneasy. Everyone else seemed oblivious to the shift in tone. Or maybe they chose to ignore it. I thought it was just an offhand comment, a throwaway remark made over a cheerful dinner. But then I caught the way Delilah's gaze held on to mine for a heartbeat longer before she turned to clink glasses with someone else. And I knew, without a doubt, she wasn't joking. And from that moment on, I should have known. The nightmare was only just beginning. After that evening, I thought the trust fund topic would fade like a bad joke. But not even a week later, Delilah showed up again. This time at my uncle's backyard barbecue in Cranberry Township. While everyone sat under the porch roof, munching on burgers and chatting about the wedding plans, Delilah pulled her chair closer to mine, her floral dress fluttering in the breeze. "Ava," she said, her voice low enough for only the two of us to hear. "I don't mean to bother you, but I've been working on the wedding budget. Brandon mentioned you might have a little extra set aside. Is that true?" I set my iced water on the wooden table, my eyes still following the kids chasing each other on the grass. "I don't have extra. That trust isn't accessible until I turn 31, and even if it were, it wouldn't be for someone else's wedding." Delilah let out a laugh, no longer the sweet tone from before, but something hushed and sharp. "Yeah, I get it. It's just, Brandon's under a lot of pressure. My family wants us to have the wedding at a nice venue, but we're struggling a bit. I just thought if you could help, just a small part, it'd be a lot more meaningful than letting that money sit untouched for another 3 years." I turned to look directly at her. "It's not just sitting there, Delilah. I have plans for it, and I'm under no obligation to pay for anyone's wedding." Her eyes didn't flinch, but her smile paused for a beat. "Oh, I didn't mean to pressure you. I just thought, you're part of Brandon's family." "Family?" I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Strange how someone who's only been in my brother's life for a few months could talk about family like it was a badge of honor. I left the party early that day. When I got home, I checked my phone and saw a message from my mom. Delilah spoke with me. She's just worried about Brandon. Don't be too harsh on her. I didn't reply. Every time I stayed silent, people assumed I was being agreeable. But this time I was simply wondering, if I keep yielding, how much more will they expect? About 2 weeks later, I agreed to attend a brunch Delilah organized with a few of her close friends. Brandon said it'd be good for building a sister-in-law relationship. I said yes, partly to see what they were planning, partly out of curiosity. The brunch was held at a French-style cafe in Shadyside. I arrived 5 minutes late. When I walked in, Delilah and 3 of her friends were seated around the table, all dressed like they were headed to a royal wedding. "Ava, you're here," Delilah beamed. "Come sit right here." Before I even took a sip of orange juice, the conversation was already being steered, very intentionally, toward money. A woman named Madison sighed. "I wish I had a fund like Ava's. If it were me, I'd invest in my family, help out the people who matter most." Another chimed in. "Exactly. Weddings are a big deal. Once you're in the family, well, what's yours is everyone's, right?" I set my glass down and looked straight at Delilah. "Thanks for the breakfast. But if this meeting was a setup to manipulate me, I think I'll excuse myself." Delilah blinked. "Ava? I didn't ask them to say any of that. I just told my friends I was stressed. I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable." I stood up, keeping my voice calm. "Delilah, whether I have money or not is my business, and I won't let anyone, your friends included, put pressure on me about it." I left the cafe. Again, that evening, Brandon called. "I really don't want you two to be at odds," he said, sounding worn out. "I think Delilah's just anxious about the wedding." Being anxious is one thing, Brandon, but constantly circling back to the idea that I should pay for your wedding? That's not anxiety anymore. "But you have—" I cut him off. "No, I don't, not yet, and even if I did, I don't owe it to anyone." Brandon exhaled. "Delilah just wants to feel like part of the family," I replied, voice cold. "Then maybe she should start by respecting the people in that family." Then I hung up. That Friday night, just after I got home from work, my mom called. "Ava, I know you feel like you're under pressure, but Delilah just wants to be accepted. She's not trying to cause trouble." "Trouble?" I let out a quiet laugh, though my chest felt hollow. "I never said she was malicious, Mom. But that money is mine. Just because I haven't used it doesn't mean it's up for grabs." Mom went silent for a long moment. "I just think, maybe if you shared a little, it'd ease the tension in the family." Ended the call, then sat quietly on the couch. The soft glow from the lamp lit the white walls around me, reflecting the same question looping in my mind. Am I being too cold? Am I clinging to something I don't even need right now? I thought walking away from that brunch would be the end of it, but I underestimated Delilah. Instead of pushing directly, she shifted tactics. In the following weeks, during every family gathering, she stopped confronting me head-on. She switched to sly, floating comments. Gentle on the surface, but sharp underneath. "It's such a blessing when someone in the family has the means to chase their dreams," she said one evening, as we sat around Grandma's table, eating pumpkin pie. "If I had that kind of fortune, I'd use it to care for loved ones. Bring everyone closer." She didn't look at me, but the eyes at the table did. Another time, while flipping through a sample wedding album, Delilah gently brushed her hand over a page featuring a lavishly decorated ceremony hall and sighed, "Brandon and I love this venue, but we know it's just a dream. We don't want to be a burden on anyone." I set my coffee cup on the table and gave a faint smile. "Who told you you're being a burden?" Delilah turned toward me, her eyes wide, as if offended. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I was just thinking out loud. That's when I realized she had switched to a Cold War strategy. Meanwhile, Brandon was more clearly siding with her. One night, I got a call from him. His voice wasn't confrontational, but something had changed. Ava, I've been thinking a lot, he started. I know you have plans for the trust, but I think I deserve a say too. We are family, after all. I raised an eyebrow. What are you saying, Brandon? That you have some kind of claim over the trust Grandpa left specifically to me? Not a claim, he quickly replied. But Delilah and I are in a tough spot right now. Just a small portion could make a big difference. I gripped the phone tighter. I've said this before. The trust isn't accessible yet, and I already have my own plans for it. Brandon was quiet for a while. You keep saying your plans. But what about everyone else? What about the family? My mom, who had always been gentle with me, was beginning to shift her tone, too. One afternoon, while I was helping at the bakery, she pulled me aside in the kitchen, away from the customer's view. I know you don't want to feel pressured, she whispered, but think about it. If your grandfather were still alive, would he want you to cling to that money? Or would he be proud to see you help your brother on his big day? I looked at her, heart sinking. I'm not clinging. I'm honoring what he left me. Because he trusted I'd use it wisely. Not because someone cornered me into it. She let out a soft sigh. Sometimes. Keeping peace in the family matters more than who's right or wrong. I gave a dry smile. The problem is, everyone's using peace as an excuse to push me into sacrificing. Even my dad, normally quiet, decided to weigh in. That Sunday evening, during dinner, he pulled his chair closer and said, I know you're a responsible person, eyes still fixed on his plate of grilled meat. But sometimes responsibility isn't just about taking care of yourself. It's about helping the people you love, even when it's not part of the plan. I felt surrounded, not by knives or shouts, but by soft, calculated words that peeled back your skin one layer at a time. Everyone kept saying it was out of love. But why did it feel like I was being cornered into giving up everything? That night, I sat alone in my apartment, under the soft yellow glow of my lamp, and opened Grandpa's old letter. His handwriting was shaky, but still intact. Ava, if there ever comes a time when people around you don't understand you, remember, Grandpa does. I left you this money because I believe you'll know what's best. I folded the letter, placed it gently on my chest, and closed my eyes. I knew I was doing the right thing, but the feeling of being isolated by my own family sat in my throat like a stone. Maybe this wasn't the climax yet, but I knew one thing for sure. If they pushed any further, I wasn't staying silent. That Saturday night, I stopped by Mom's house to pick up a few old things still in the garage. As I walked into the living room, I saw Delilah sitting there with my mom. They were drinking tea, chatting like old friends. I gave a polite nod, planning to head straight to the garage. But Delilah stood up. Ava, she said, her tone no longer sweet or roundabout. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. I turned back and caught my mother's eyes. She was staring into her teacup, like she wished she could vanish into it. You've said no, and I understand that, Delilah continued. But I have to be honest. I'm really disappointed. You have the power to help us start our life in a good place, and instead, you're choosing to keep it to yourself. I don't want to use this word, but honestly, you're being selfish. I froze. There was a moment of silence so tight it could crack glass. My mother didn't say a word. Selfish? I repeated, each syllable grinding out like stone. You're talking about money I haven't even touched, left to me by my grandfather with specific conditions. And you're calling me selfish for not breaking the rules so you can have a lavish wedding? Delilah crossed her arms, chin slightly raised. It's not lavish. We just want one special day to start our life. And I think if you really cared about family, you'd do the right thing." I didn't respond. I just looked at my mom, but she stayed silent. She didn't take my side. 3 days later, Brandon texted me, asking to have lunch at a small Mexican place near my office. I hesitated but eventually agreed. Maybe I was still holding out hope for an apology. A shred of conscience, a sign that my younger brother was still the person I once trusted. But when I walked into the restaurant, I saw Delilah sitting at the table too, notebook resting on her lap. Her eyes sparkled, like I had just walked into a contract negotiation. "You made it!" Brandon stood up. "We already ordered for you. Hope you still like enchiladas." I sat down, quietly watching them. This didn't feel like a family meal. It felt like a transaction. After a few pleasantries, Delilah opened her notebook. "So, we've given it a lot of thought, and I think we can meet in the middle." I tilted my head. "Meet in the middle?" Brandon jumped in, visibly tense. "What we mean is, if you can't give all of it, maybe you could give half? You'd still keep the rest. That way everyone wins." "You're asking me to split in half a trust I haven't even been allowed to access yet, correct?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. Delilah nodded, as if the request was completely reasonable. I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. "Thanks for taking the time to plan my future for me. But the answer is still no." Delilah frowned. "You really won't compromise? Not even a little?" I looked her straight in the eye. "I don't owe any compromises to people who've spent weeks pressuring and manipulating me." Brandon exhaled. "Ava, I thought you were the one who cared about family. And you," I said coldly, "are selling out your sister to please your fiancé." I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The next day, my mom called me over for what she said would be a calm conversation. When I arrived, everyone was there. Dad, Mom, Brandon, Delilah, and me. A full-blown family meeting. They sat around the dining table like we were mediating a property dispute. My dad started. "Ava, we're not trying to pressure you, but the whole family feels if you contributed part of the trust, it would relieve a lot of tension." My mom added, "Just a little, as a sign that you support and respect your brother's happiness." Brandon said softly, "You're in control of everything. One click, and it's done. I know you can do it." I looked at each of them. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one asked how I felt after being called selfish. They just wanted to fix the issue. And the issue was me not giving them money. I stood up. "If this is what you call family, then at the very least, remember, family is where you're respected, not demanded from." I walked out. And this time, I didn't look back. That night, after the exhausting and disappointing family meeting, I came home feeling something I'd never quite felt before. Angry, hurt, but strangely clear. There were no more tears, no more self-doubt. Just one sentence pounding in my head like a drumbeat. They won't stop, unless I make them stop. The next morning, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, Estate and Family Harassment Attorney, Pittsburgh. I scheduled a meeting with Melanie Grant, a sharp attorney in her 40s with eyes that made it hard for anyone to lie for long. When I walked into her office that Tuesday afternoon, I said one sentence. "My family is trying to force me to hand over a trust I'm not even legally allowed to touch, and they don't know I've started collecting evidence." Melanie nodded and motioned for me to sit. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." And I didn't. Not skipping a single detail. From Delilah's subtle hints to the lunch where she opened her notebook like she was proposing a business deal, to the family meeting where everyone stared at me like I was the only thing standing in the way of happiness. Melanie didn't interrupt. She just took notes and occasionally frowned. When I got to the part where Delilah directly asked about the trust's value and how her friends started messaging me with comments like, "People with money should share it," Melanie closed her notebook. "Ava, this is no longer just a family matter," she said. "This is a pattern of harassment. It shows signs of coercion and emotional harm." I swallowed hard. "So, what can I do now?" "We'll send Miss Delilah a cease and desist letter. If she continues, I'll escalate this to court. In the meantime, I want you to start collecting all evidence. Texts, emails, voice recordings if needed. And under no circumstance should you meet with them alone again without a witness." But before I could take action, Delilah made the first move. 3 days later, I got a message from an old college friend. "Ava, I just saw Delilah post a story about a future sister-in-law who has money but never knows how to share. Everyone knows she's talking about you." I checked Instagram. She didn't mention me by name, but every word was aimed squarely in my direction. Some people don't understand what family means. Not everyone with money has a heart. The comments were full of sympathy, judgment, and mockery. Some people even tagged Delilah, wishing her strength in such a selfish family. I was stunned. But then, the shock gave way to determination. I sent screenshots of everything to my attorney, Melanie. She simply replied, "Preserve them. Don't respond. I'm drafting the letter." I thought this was just a social media stunt. But the bigger blow came the following week. The head of HR at my company called me into his office. "Ava, I need to ask you something," he said, his face tense. "Someone called claiming to be a relative and asked to verify your salary and income records." I was stunned. "Did they leave a name?" "No name. Female voice. Polite tone. But way too many questions." The moment I left that office, I knew exactly who was behind it. That evening, I called Melanie. "She's trying to dig into my financial records through my job. Is there anything worse than this?" Melanie's voice cut sharp. "Good. Now we have a clear basis for the formal cease and desist. And if she takes one more step, I'll proceed with filing a civil harassment claim." The next morning, the letter was sent. The wording was simple, but firm. "Any attempts to access, disclose, or interfere with the personal or financial affairs of our client, Ms. Ava Thompson, will be treated as harassment, invasion of privacy, and defamation, and may result in serious legal consequences." I hit send on the email with a copy to Brandon. I didn't say a word. No apology, no explanation. I never expected the turning point in this whole battle would be a misdirected message. It happened on a Monday morning, just as I was making coffee at work. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages were flying in from the family group chat, normally just a place for bakery updates and occasional photos of baked goods. The first message was from Brandon, sent straight into the family chat, which included me, our parents, Delilah, and 2 aunts from Dad's side. "Delilah, I can't believe you sent that stuff to your friends. You called Ava a walking safe and said Mom and Dad would pressure her into giving in? Are you serious right now?" Then came 3 screenshots, all from Brandon's phone. I froze behind the coffee counter. The screenshots were texts Delilah had sent in a group chat titled Bride Squad. One message read, "Just let Robert and Susan do their thing. Ava will crack soon enough. She's not used to being cornered." Another said, "Brandon's worried, but I'm not. Half that trust fund will be my wedding gift. Once the extended family chimes in, she'll fold." The last one hit me like a punch to the chest. Pretending to respect Ava is exhausting. But it works. She loves being treated kindly. So, I fake it. No big deal. I don't know what made Brandon look through those messages, but it was clear he meant to send them to Delilah privately and accidentally dropped them into the family group. For the next 3 minutes, the chat went dead silent. Then my mom texted, "Delilah, what is this about?" My dad followed up, "Delilah, are these messages real?" No response. A minute later, Delilah finally replied, "You're all misunderstanding. I was just venting to close friends. Those messages don't reflect how I really feel." I didn't say anything. I just left the group chat. At night, Brandon called me. His voice was trembling slightly. Ava, I'm sorry. I saw the messages when Delilah left her phone charging on the kitchen counter. I didn't mean to blow everything up like that. I was just so angry. My hands were shaking and I hit the wrong button. I didn't respond. Didn't know she thought that way. I thought she was just stressed about the wedding. But after reading what she wrote, I felt ashamed. I closed my eyes and kept my tone steady. I warned you so many times. I know. I was blind. I thought you were just trying to hold on to the money, not that you were hurt. I let out a cold laugh. What I've been trying to protect, Brandon, is my self-respect. The money? That's something Delilah was never worthy of touching. In the days that followed, the illusion shattered. Delilah tried to do damage control by calling every relative. She claimed the messages were just jokes in a private chat, and that Ava is blowing this out of proportion because of pride. But no one believed her, especially after they had all seen her actual words. One of my aunts, who had once messaged me to be more understanding, now sent me an apology. I was wrong. I shouldn't have taken sides without knowing the full story. A cousin who had commented publicly on Delilah's Facebook post quietly unliked it and messaged me. Ava, I'm really sorry I trusted the wrong person. I didn't need to speak up. I didn't need to seek revenge. The truth did it for me. Delilah stopped showing up to family gatherings. Her social media went silent. The sweet stories, the ring photos, the countdown to the big day, all vanished like they'd never existed. My parents, they changed too. Not with direct apologies, but through softer glances when I walked into a room. Through the way they stopped mentioning the wedding. Through the silence that felt more like remorse than distance. As for me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt lighter. Because in the end, I didn't have to scream to defend myself. I just had to wait for the truth to speak. 3 days after my conversation with Brandon, I got a short text. I've ended things with Delilah. I'm starting therapy. I need to understand how I let it go this far. I stared at the message on my screen, not sure how to feel. Not victorious, not angry anymore, just hollow. Maybe because deep down, I always knew this day would come. Brandon had once been the little brother who chased after me, fought over toys, called me the best sister ever whenever I baked cookies. But then he grew up, drawn to a kind of spotlight handed out more easily than truth. And when that light faded, he finally realized how long he'd been standing in the wrong place. Delilah vanished completely. No calls, no apologies, no public explanation. A friend from my yoga group told me she'd canceled the wedding venue and returned the dress. Relatives stopped referring to her as the future sister-in-law. All that remained was a void, like a smudge on a family photo that never got framed. My parents started changing in the smallest ways. My mom would ask what I wanted to eat over the weekend. My dad sent me articles about real estate investing with sincere advice. There was still a distance between us, but at least now, it wasn't built from pressure or expectations. It was caution rooted in regret. One Sunday evening, when I stopped by the bakery to see them, my mom handed me a box of ginger cookies. My favorite since childhood, but something she rarely made because of how time-consuming they were. She gently placed the box in my hands. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for not listening to you sooner." I looked at her. "I don't need you to undo the past. I just need you to understand that I wasn't wrong for protecting what's mine." She nodded. "I understand. And I'm proud of you for doing something I never had the courage to do." I said nothing more, because I didn't need to. Some forgiveness doesn't require words. It only needs someone to truly listen and understand, not out of guilt, but out of choice. And that's enough. I began setting new boundaries. I didn't show up at every family dinner. I stopped responding to messages that felt more like interrogation than care, and I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. The trust fund still sits untouched in the account, waiting for the day I turn 31. But now, I no longer see it as a reward or a burden. It's simply a symbol of trust. One passed down from my grandfather, and one I continue to build with myself. I'm in no rush to use it. I've always been capable of building my life with my own 2 hands, and if the day comes when I decide to use that money, it won't be because someone forced me to. It'll be because I choose to, at the right time, for the right reasons. Brandon is still in therapy. Sometimes he sends me a short message sharing something from his sessions, or just writes, "What do you think if I go back to study finance?" I'm not sure if he's changed completely, but I do know he's starting over. And that's the only thing I needed to see from the brother who once turned his back on me. As for me, after everything, I don't see myself as someone who won. I'm just someone who stayed steady through a storm. And from all that seemed broken, I learned 3 simple, precious truths. That family should never cost you your sense of self, that kindness needs boundaries, and that true peace can't exist if it comes at the price of your own values. One early autumn morning, I stood at the door of my small apartment, holding a cup of coffee, the chilly breeze running through my unbrushed hair. I smiled, thinking of the future. I still don't know exactly what I'll do with the trust fund. Maybe a small bookshop in the neighborhood, maybe that unfinished master's degree I still dream about. Maybe something I haven't even imagined yet. But now, I'm no longer in a hurry to define success or prove anything. This journey taught me to value inner strength more than outside validation. And maybe the most important thing isn't the money my grandfather left, but how I choose to live in a way that honors his faith in me. Whatever lies ahead, I know I'll walk forward with my dignity intact and a calm no one can take away from me. What do you think about Ava's choices and the way she stood up to family pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories about family, boundaries, and self-respect.